The small cafe sat on the corner of a busy street, a place where people came more for the noise of conversation than for the food. Every evening the place filled with students, workers, and travelers who just wanted a warm drink after a long day. The cafe also had an old upright piano in one corner, although nobody really played it anymore. It was mostly used as decoration, a place where people placed their cups while taking photos for social media. On one rainy afternoon, a young man walked in quietly. He looked like someone who had been traveling for days. His clothes were simple, his shoes worn, and his hair slightly messy. He carried a small bag over his shoulder, and his eyes hinted at tiredness. Most customers didn't even notice him enter, and those who did glanced at him once, then returned to their conversations. He approached the counter slowly and asked for a glass of water. His voice was soft but polite. The cashier looked him up and down, wondering if he even had money to buy anything. Water was free, so she handed it over without saying anything. The young man took the glass, sat near the old piano, and looked around the place. He watched families laughing, friends arguing about random things, and couples sharing desserts. He didn't speak to anyone. He just sat, taking slow sips of water, as if trying to warm himself from the cold outside. After a few minutes, his eyes went to the piano again. He stared at it the way someone might stare at an old friend. His fingers tapped gently on his glass, following some rhythm only he could hear. He looked at the instrument for a long time, and then he slowly stood up. He walked toward the piano. At first, no one cared. People were used to kids sitting at the piano and banging random keys for fun, but when this young man pulled the bench out and sat on it, a few people raised their eyebrows. The cashier whispered to a server, guessing he would probably ruin the peace in the cafe. One table of students even smirked, already preparing their phones to record something funny. Another customer laughed quietly and said, "Watch, he won't know anything. This old piano is going to cry today." The young man heard all of it, but he didn't react. He just breathed deeply and placed his hands gently on the keys. His posture wasn't the posture of someone playing for attention. It was the posture of someone who respected the instrument. He pressed one key softly. The sound was a little out of tune, but warm. He pressed another, then another. His fingers tested the keys like someone checking if an old door could still be opened. A server passed by and said, "Hey, don't break it. It's old." She meant it as a joke, but others laughed. Still, he stayed quiet. He took another deep breath. Then he played. The first notes were light and soft, but they had real shape. The melody rose like a gentle wave, smooth and controlled. The sound filled the cafe in a way that made one person turn their head. Then another, and then another. The smirks on the students' faces slowly faded. One of them lowered his phone without realizing it. A couple who had been arguing stopped mid-sentence and looked toward the piano. The cashier leaned forward, trying to see who was playing. The young man's fingers moved like water flowing over stone, smooth, natural, and effortless. There was no show-off energy, no aggression. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't even trying to prove anything. He played like someone who simply needed to breathe through music. The melody grew stronger, deeper, fuller. It felt like a story, one filled with quiet pain and hidden strength. The cafe began to fall silent. The clinking of cups slowed. People leaned closer, not wanting to disturb the moment. One child stood up from his seat, eyes wide. He tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mama, is he famous?" His mother shook her head slowly. She didn't know, but the music certainly made him sound like someone who should be. For a few seconds, the cafe felt like a small concert hall. Even the rain outside softened, as if listening. The young man continued, his expression calm, focused. His hands danced across the keys, moving from soft melodies to richer chords. He played with the gentleness of someone healing and the strength of someone who had been broken before but learned to rise again. One older man near the window closed his eyes and simply enjoyed the music, letting it take him back to memories he had almost forgotten. A woman who had been scrolling on her phone slowly set it down. Her eyes locked on the pianist. She whispered to her friend, "Where did he learn to play like that?" The friend shook his head. Nobody knew, and that mystery only made the moment stronger. The music rose again, this time brighter, almost hopeful. Then it softened until it was as gentle as rain on glass. People held their breath without meaning to, listening for every note, every emotion hidden inside the sound. The young man moved like he was born with music in his blood. His fingers didn't hesitate, not even once. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look proud either. He looked peaceful, completely peaceful. And then, after a long, graceful final note, he let his hands rest on his lap. Silence. Real silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were too stunned. Then one person clapped, then another, then the entire cafe filled with applause. A surprised, genuine applause. Some people even stood up. The cashier who had doubted him earlier covered her mouth in shock. The students who had laughed at him now looked embarrassed. One of them clapped the loudest, trying to make up for the way he had behaved minutes earlier. The young man stood up awkwardly, not expecting such a reaction. He gave a small smile, thanked the room quietly, and stepped away from the piano. A few people tried to talk to him, but he only responded politely and briefly. He didn't seem like someone comfortable with attention. He picked up his bag and walked toward the door as if he planned to leave right away. But before he reached the exit, a cafe worker stopped him gently. "Excuse me, sir, would you like something to eat?" On the house, the young man looked surprised. "Why?" She smiled. "Because you made this place feel alive. I think everyone would agree you earned it." The customers nodded. Some even cheered softly. For the first time he truly smiled a calm, grateful smile. He sat back down at a table, accepted a warm meal, and ate quietly. People watched him, still curious, still amazed, but they kept their distance. They could sense he wasn't someone who wanted the spotlight. What nobody knew, not yet, was that the young man had once played on big stages. He had once been praised, trained, and respected, but life had taken unexpected turns. Problems at home, financial struggles, and personal loss had made him step away from music. He had been traveling from town to town, finding small jobs just to get by. And now, by accident, he had walked into a cafe that needed music as much as he needed a moment to breathe again. Part 1 ends with the cafe glowing with the sound he left behind, and with people whispering that they wished he would come back tomorrow. But the young man wasn't sure if he ever would. He had no idea that his life and the cafe's future was about to change in a way nobody expected. The cafe remained unusually calm even after the young man finished his meal. People kept glancing at him, not in a rude way, but with curiosity and respect. It felt like everyone had just witnessed something soft but powerful, something that didn't happen in ordinary places like this. He finished eating quietly, thanked the worker who brought him the meal, and prepared to leave. He put the strap of his small bag over his shoulder and walked toward the door again. He didn't really want attention. He didn't want people asking questions. All he wanted was to keep moving, keep traveling, and maybe find another place where he could rest for a night. But before he could step outside, the older man who had been sitting near the window stood up. Double quotes. "Son," he said gently, "you play like someone who's lived 1,000 stories." The young man paused. He wasn't sure what to say. He lowered his eyes respectfully. The older man continued, "I used to teach music many years ago. I've listened to countless players, some trained, some naturally gifted, but what you played today, that wasn't just skill, that was heart." A few people nearby nodded in agreement. The young man smiled politely. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "You're welcome," the older man replied. "But tell me something. Why aren't you performing somewhere officially?" The young man's smile faded a little. He didn't want to open old wounds, so he answered simply, "Life just got complicated." The older man didn't push. He just nodded with understanding. Inside the cafe, people continued whispering. Some wondered where the young man came from. Others wondered if he might return tomorrow. In a way, the music had brought everyone together. Even strangers had shared a moment without speaking to each other. The young man stepped out into the cool evening air. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened with reflections from the streetlights. He took a deep breath. For a moment he felt lighter, as if playing the piano had opened a locked door inside his chest. He didn't know where he would sleep that night. He rarely knew. He planned to keep walking until he found a cheap room or a safe corner near a bus station. It was the kind of life he had become used to, a life that kept him moving but never allowed him to settle. But the cafe door opened behind him. The same worker who had given him food stepped out. She looked a little nervous but determined. "Excuse me," she called out softly. He turned around. "Yeah, sorry to bother you," she said, "but the manager wants to talk to you. Only if you're okay with it." He hesitated. Managers usually meant trouble. They usually meant rules, warnings, or complaints. But she looked friendly, and her tone wasn't harsh. So he followed her inside again. The manager was a calm-looking woman with sharp eyes but a warm smile. She gestured for him to sit. "Listen," she began. "I've been running this cafe for 7 years. Music used to be a big part of our evenings. But over time, people stopped playing, or if they played, it wasn't well good." The young man gave a small smile. "But today," she continued, "you changed the whole energy of this place. You brought something beautiful, and I haven't seen customers this peaceful or happy in a long time." He didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded. The manager leaned forward. I want to ask something, and please don't feel pressured. Would you consider coming back? Not every day, not scheduled. Just whenever you can, when you feel like it. The young man's eyes widened. You don't even know me. That's true, she laughed gently. But sometimes you don't need to know everything. Sometimes you just feel something is right. He looked down at his hands. He hadn't felt right about anything for a long time. Playing earlier felt natural, but also frightening. It reminded him of the life he once had, the life that fell apart. I'm not sure, he said honestly. I don't stay in one place. I'm not even sure where I'll be tomorrow. The manager nodded. No pressure at all. But if you ever return, you're welcome to play, and you'll get free meals. It's the least we can do after what we heard today. A few customers who overheard nodded excitedly. The young man felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't about the meal. It was about being welcomed, being seen, being appreciated for something he had almost forgotten he loved. He thanked the manager softly, then left again with a peaceful but uncertain smile. The night was calm as he walked down the sidewalk. His mind replayed the sound of the piano, the applause, the kindness of strangers. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. He reached a small park where he sometimes rested. He chose a quiet bench under a tree and sat down, hugging his bag close to his chest. He stared at the ground, thinking about his past. He had once trained at a respected music center. He had played on stages, surrounded by people who believed in him. But then his father lost his job. Bills piled up. He tried to work while studying, but the pressure grew too heavy. He started skipping practice to take extra shifts. His teacher tried to help, but life outside music didn't pause for him. Eventually, he quit everything he loved because he felt he had no choice. He needed to survive. Music became something he only thought about when he couldn't sleep, and slowly he convinced himself he wasn't good enough anymore. But today changed something in him. He closed his eyes and let the quiet night wrap around him. He slept lightly, waking up whenever someone passed by. But he didn't feel hopeless tonight. He felt curious, as if tomorrow might hold something new. When morning came, the streets were busy again. People rushed to work, delivery bikes moved past quickly, and shop owners opened their doors. The young man stood up, stretched his back, and walked toward the bus stop, unsure of where he wanted to go. But as he waited, he kept thinking about the cafe, the piano, the applause, the smiles. His heart felt pulled toward that place, even though he told himself not to depend on it. After an hour of wandering, he ended up standing across the street from the cafe again. He didn't walk in, he just watched from a distance. The manager was arranging tables. The cashier was setting pastries in the display. Customers were taking seats. He felt nervous, almost embarrassed. What if they didn't actually want him back today? What if yesterday was just a moment that passed? But the older man from last night walked out with a takeaway cup and spotted him standing there. He smiled warmly and waved. You're back earlier than I expected. The young man rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I'm not sure why I came. Maybe I just wanted to see the place again. You should come inside, the older man said. It's better when that piano isn't gathering dust. The young man laughed softly. I don't want to bother anyone. You won't, the older man assured him still. He hesitated. The older man placed a hand on his shoulder gently, like a father would. Sometimes life gives you a second chance. When it does, don't run away from it. Those simple words hit him deeply. He took a slow breath and crossed the street. The bell rang when he entered, and the same warm smell of coffee greeted him. Some customers recognized him instantly and smiled. The cashier lifted her hand in a small wave. The manager noticed him and motioned him closer. If you feel like playing again, she said kindly, the piano is waiting for you. He looked at the piano. It didn't feel like a dusty old instrument today. It felt like an invitation, a doorway back to a part of himself he thought he'd lost forever. He walked toward it slowly, his heartbeat steady but full. He sat on the bench again. He touched the keys once more, and when he began to play, the whole cafe turned silent exactly like yesterday. But this time, something was different. This time, the young man wasn't just passing through. This time he was finding his way back home.